Hey, it's Liz, and today I wanted to do something a bit different. One of the reasons why I wanted to start my channel, Dawning Perspective, obviously as noted in the title, is to essentially explore perspective and different viewpoints on various topics and things like that. One of the topics that I actually very much enjoy kind of like musing on myself is language, and in general kind of how we use words. I actually majored in linguistics at UC Berkeley. I did it just because I really like kind of analyzing how people speak to each other. I have been paying a lot more attention to the words that I use, the words that others use, and how we internalize that, as well as how others perceive and portray it as well. And so because of this, I actually want to start kind of like a mini series on my channel, which is going to be Words Have Power. With this series, I kind of want to focus on how, if we better understand the words that we are using, how we can actually direct our life to go the direction that we want it to. Because obviously, the way that we exist and everything else, it all happens in our heads. And so if we take control over how we are communicating within our heads, we have a better way of shaping our reality and everything else. Language is one of those things that we all have a native language, and while we don't inherently understand the rules of it all the time, we don't have to understand the rules of a language in order to use it. However, even if you knew the rules of the language, doesn't mean that you know how to use it to portray the meaning that you mean to take. Long story short, I want to be able to explore words and make them a bit more clear. Today, my topic, you probably going to put it in the description, so you probably know already, but I want to discuss the difference between identity and a label. The place to start with this topic today is actually defining what does identity actually mean and what does a label actually mean. An identity is a distinguishing characteristic or personality of an individual. A label is seen as a descriptive or identifying word or phrase. So the difference here is a label can be identifying, but it is not an identity. And to break this down, through our lives, obviously, we are given labels simply because as humans, we have this need to understand. And part of understanding is being able to relate new information to what we currently already know. When you meet a new person, there are first impressions, and you're kind of figuring out who this person is, and you're figuring out what kind of person they are. We do this with everything that we come in contact with, not just people, but items as well as activities and pretty much everything in our life. We find a way to define the things around us. I'm primarily going to be focusing on people today, both how we identify and label others versus how they do it to us as well. The way I understand it, obviously, as we're growing up, it's all about finding ourselves, and I feel like it's really hard to understand yourself until you start getting older and you're able to kind of come into your own as you're growing up, because obviously you need a bit more complex thought to be able to form your identity. You kind of rely on the labels that you're given. So I don't know if this might sound familiar to you, but I know for me growing up, me and my siblings, we were all given labels of how our parents saw us and how our teachers saw us and how our friends saw us. And so, for example, for me, I've held many labels in my life. It's only been in the past several years that I've been trying to break them down and figure out, is this just a label? Is this just how someone else has seen me? Or is there something in here that I hold deep within and I relate to? So I've held a lot of labels in my life. I have been the weird one, I've been the dramatic one, I've been the loud one, I've been the pretty one, I've been the smart one, I've been the bitchy one, I've been bossy, I've been a lot of different things. And that's where what I started noticing in the labeling that I was kind of latching onto from others were things that didn't have good connotation in their meaning. And they had more of a negative leaning, and it made me feel very bad about myself, and I felt very self-conscious. It was one of those things that I was clinging to this identifying characteristic and this identifying definition that I was given from other people. And so as I was growing and I started to realize that I was using these labels that were given to me as a crutch. And that's when I decided I didn't really like how I was interacting with the world. I wasn't happy. I was constantly feeling judged. And that's when I made the change to decide that I wanted to look through the labels and figure out who I am. Am I really just these things that people told me, or could I be more? Depending on when people meet you and depending on what instance in your life people interact with you will determine the labels that they give you. So that's where labels don't actually define you, it defines the perspective of the other person. What does define you is your own identity, and that's kind of what you internalize for yourself. The way that I started figuring out my identity was being able to look at, one, the labels that were given to me and sift through them and see what actually feels right. Do I really think that all I am is just like this list of like 6 things, or do I feel like I'm more? And then from there too, it was looking at the things that make me happy. What do I enjoy doing? It's not about what other people think that I might be good at. It's about what I really enjoy. And that's where I feel by being able to differentiate how people see us and what people label us versus how we identify our own individuality can help to create an awareness of our interaction with the world, and through that awareness we are then able to shape it. Anyways, these are just kind of my thoughts on how we kind of internalize potentially what people say to us, and maybe a start for how to kind of turn things around and take it under your own control. So anyways, have you ever been given a label that just felt off? Or did you find a realization for your own identity that no one else has necessarily touched upon? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below for how your own personal growth has been going. And if you like it, you can give a thumbs up. But anyways, if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Hope all is well. Bye!